So, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the Match Fit Football Podcast. I'm Darren Potts, your host, as always, here on the show. And apologies for you guys watching on video. You're seeing a different backdrop to the usual office backdrop that I'm in. That is thanks to my 5-month-and-a-half-old daughter who's decided to sleep in that room. So, apologies to you guys who are looking at the bedroom instead of the office background. But that aside, we're joined by a very special guest today. He has played in the World Cup for the United States of America. He has played in the Premier League for Watford. He has scored a winning goal in the playoff final for Watford to take them to the Premier League FA Cup semi-finals. You name it, he's probably done it. The best players in the world, he's probably played against them at some stage. It is the one and only Jay DeMerit. Jay, welcome to the show.
Hey, Darren, thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Delighted to get you here. And like where I like to always start is I always like to touch a little bit on our guest's journey. For a lot of our listeners, they may be involved in some form of academy football or structured football. Your pathway was a little bit different. So I want you just to touch a little bit on that, but also touch on the characteristics that you felt you needed to succeed in order to become a professional footballer.
Yeah, I mean, I think, for me, I grew up in the town of Green Bay, Wisconsin. It wasn't the biggest town in the world. We had a nice big football team there, the Green Bay Packers. And so kind of sport and community was something I grew up in. I didn't grow up in Manchester, so I didn't have a soccer team in my backyard. But I think, having a professional sports team in my backyard really gave me that kind of dream big environment, walking to Lambeau Field on a yearly basis, seeing it in the background of when you drive by it, like that was something that was ingrained into who I was as a person. But then you grow up in Green Bay. It's a small town, blue collar town where everyone works hard. They're genuine people. They care about you. They ask you how you are. And so that's kind of what I grew up in. I was a 3-sport athlete. I come from the multi-sport background. I wasn't an academy program person. I played basketball in the winters. My dad was the track coach at our high school. And so I ran track in the spring and then played soccer in the fall and the summer. And so I didn't really know how good I was at the time. When I was 18, I had 2 scholarship offers, one to play basketball and one to play soccer. And, and I think it's always important when we talk about developing young people, we all still have to realize that we need to use our brains too, and not just focus on the sport, because the majority of the rules say that, you're going to have to do that other thing. And I think it's not something to be scared of. I think it's something we should appreciate. And if we get opportunities to go somewhere at 18, 19, whether it's a university or an academy or something, or even a young professional team, we have to start thinking about other sides of that. And so my opportunity, why I picked the school I did, I went to Chicago to go to design school, because I knew that if I wasn't going to make it as a soccer pro, and again, at the time I was only 18, I hadn't played at a really high level. So I didn't think I was going to ever do what I did, but I saw the opportunity and I was like, well, if I can go to a town like Chicago, which I was ready to get out of my small town. I was one of those guys that I wanted to leave. I was ready to go. Again, I had great parents. I have an incredible support system around me, but I was ready to leave home. I was ready to go on my own and see what I could do. And there was no bigger place than Chicago for me, living in just north of there in Wisconsin. That was the big city I wanted, but it also had this design degree because I like doing art in school. I like creating things. And they had a design degree. And so based on that other basketball school that had some engineering stuff I wanted to do, I was like, no, I think design is the way. And so that's where I was like, do my school too. And not just I can go be a pro and then good luck, I'm going to be Wayne Rooney. Like that wasn't part of the mindset for me. It was go and then get an opportunity, continue to get better at the sport, get myself in a much bigger arena that has better players and a good university system. Cool. And get to go to something to school that I actually want to do. And so for me, it was those kind of 3 things that really helped with my decision to leave town and get to university.
And from that, obviously you went on this crazy journey of you left Chicago, you went to England, you ended up playing for like several teams in England, so a non-league side. And I believe your story was you played against Watford in a friendly. And it's really that friendly, that match of playing against Heider Helgeson, and unless I'm mistaken, is really what drew the attention of the scouts and the coaches to you specifically.
Yeah, and it's those types of games that any kid that wants to make it has to really understand. You don't get many of them, and that's always what we talk about with opportunity. And if you're ready to swing that bat when that opportunity comes, you'll have a much better chance of doing it. But for me, I moved to England with purpose. I moved to England because I thought it was a good opportunity for me to be in a concentrated environment that America couldn't provide for me. And in America, I was already chosen or not chosen. I didn't get picked. I had walk-on opportunities that were really, minimal. And so I thought, if I'm starting at the bottom of the ring anyway, I might as well do it in a place like England that has 96 professional teams plus 12 other divisions below it. Maybe I can get there and do my thing and see if I can catch the eye, all while still carrying humility and going, I know I'm in the back of the line. I know I'm going to land on English shores, and I got to sit in line and wait, because I know that there's a million kids in England that are already ahead of me. And so that was my mindset going in, but also knowing that I did know myself enough. I'd played against enough players that were in the MLS and done well enough where I was like, I've had 4 years of real soccer experience. Then I was 22, 23. I'd played university soccer. That's it. And I'd only played in 4 years. I changed position, but then I became an All-American in just 3 years. And so I knew where I was going on my trajectory. And this is also where we have to rely on our own self-awareness to figure out what we want to do with our own lives and make our own decisions. And I was aware enough to know that where I was in my trajectory as a player, but the people that would have picked me didn't know where I was, because I'm not on the sheet from their scouting report that says who are the academy teams from the U17, national team, or the Chicago Fire reserves, the LA Galaxy reserves. Who am I supposed to look at? I was never on those scouting lists, but I knew that. And so I knew I had to take it upon myself to create my own story. And so that's what I did. And when I got to England, again, I had a couple validation games where I played against guys that had just been released from, QPR, from the second division. And that was the guy playing up front for the non-league team I was playing for. And just to put it in context, I was playing in the 12th division when I landed on UK shores. I was making 40 pounds in an envelope after the game in cash, which for North Americans, that's about 60, 70 bucks. So I wasn't exactly making my mom proud after earning a university degree in design, making 60 bucks a week. But, I also knew that was part of my story and what I needed to do. And that's all I needed. I was very fortunate to be living in, rent free at my friend's mom's house in the attic. And again, it wasn't the most glorious attic I've ever seen, but it was certainly something that I appreciated, to have a roof over my head. And at that stage in my life, that's all I wanted. And it's all I needed. And then the next thing I needed to do was that opportunity and wait for that. And I knew, again, I knew I'd have to do it the hard way. I knew I'd have to wait for it. And it took me just over a year. So I'd played a whole season of non-league football. And at the end of that season, the whole year, and I got a third division tryout, a team called Shrewsbury in the middle of England, not far from Manchester. And I think they were in the third division at the time. And I had another tryout for Oxford, which was Oxford United, which was kind of in the same division. And so at the end of that season, I was like, man, I'm jumping 6 divisions. I'm jumping 7 divisions here. And so that was my indicator. That was my validation, where I'm now playing against guys that are in the first and second division and doing well in the games. That's my judgment of whether I feel like I belong there. And then on the other side of that, I am seeing scouts that I don't know, that I've never met, that are asking me to skip 6 divisions and go try out for a third division team. For me, those 2 indicators and my own awareness is yes, keep going. It's not like had 6 trials, over 6, never had a look, or nobody's ever told you that you can make it in this country. For me, that's over 2. And so thankfully I had the other side where I was like, okay, well, I know it's kind of shitty and I know it's not that awesome to be sitting and living in an attic making 60 bucks, but I know that I'm seeing my progression. And so I'm validating my experience and really going, okay, I've skipped 6 divisions. That must be doing pretty well. And then they try to sign me. I didn't have any of my paperwork or anything that I needed. And so I went home for the off season, came back. And that's when I played against Watford in that friendly. Mm-hmm. And so Watford was a first division team. Again, the coach had seen enough. They were, as time and circumstance would have it. And we need that too in our stories. And I think for me, they had just come down from the Premier League, so they didn't have as much money as they once had, and they had to play a bunch of players that they were paying Premier League wages, and so they didn't have any money to bring in any players. And they had a bunch of older center backs, and so they didn't need any, and those are bigger money guys, of course, and so they just needed some young buck talent that just was like they could groom, and so they brought me on because I was free. I wasn't a risk because it didn't cost them any money, and they could take a chance on someone like me, and I was something that they didn't have. And I was more of like an athletic, very coachable competitor, where it was like, we had a lot of older guys that knew how to read the game. They knew how to, do all the things, but they didn't have the mobility, you know what I mean? So they needed, center backs, we work in partnerships. And so they needed a partner like me and I was free. So thankfully I got the opportunity and made the most of that trial. And just in the beginning of that second season, I was a Watford contracted player, only making £25,000 though. So I still wasn't, it was just above a minimum wage market as a professional soccer player, but I was doing it for Snickers bars and $10 the week before. So I was elated.
I can imagine that feeling. And one of the key words that you've used throughout, that explanation there is the word opportunity. And I want to ask you about the specific opportunity of playing for Watford. And even then, when you signed for Watford and playing alongside, and we'll get into playing alongside, Malky Mackay and Sean Dyche were two of the guys that you played alongside, and both went on to have excellent managerial careers as well. But the word opportunity, it really, really caught me, because you could go in there with, I wouldn't say a weak mindset, but you could go in there nervous with a bit of trepidation. But you obviously, did you have to have something about you to go in there and say, I'm not missing this opportunity. This isn't bypassing me. There is a sense of respect, but I'm not going to let you play just because you're who you are. Like, tell me about that experience, of the mental side of someone coming, jumping up that number of leagues.
And that's a good question. And there's a couple answers that I always like to talk about in this situation, because I've talked a lot about validation too. And I think there's ways we do that. And I think I always drew on when I play against the team. So for instance, let's just talk about the Watford trial. I walk in, I've been playing for the reserves for the first week of my trial. And so that's the second team. I hadn't really played with the first team yet. And so the coach calls me into his office and he's like, I heard you've been doing well with the reserves. Why don't you come to the game tomorrow? We're playing against a team called Real Zaragoza. Spanish La Liga team. They just won the Copa del Rey the year before. And I had never even been to a big soccer stadium really before, especially played in a full one. And it was the last preseason friendly, big Spanish league coming into town. The stadium was packed. And so I walked into the stadium thinking I'm going to get a warm up with the team where I get to see the stadium. And I walked in the locker room on the whiteboard and I was in the starting lineup with 10 other players that I hadn't even trained with yet. And so these guys are all the pros and they're the number ones and on the first team. And so I am crapping my pants and going, what? This is crazy. Again, my immediate panic response is, why did the coach tell me he's a jerk? I'm getting angry at the coach. Just tell me whatever. I'm going, am I ready? So fear is starting to creep in, right? And that's natural. That's what most people will naturally feel. And I think I was someone that really understood what I was good at and controlling what I can control, and I continued to live in that as the number one motto I live with is I think a lot of times we get out of our heads or into our heads too deep and start thinking about things we can't control, what you're going to think about, or what the coach is going to think of me, or what the center back next to me, if he's going to be yelling at me or whatever. And then we start to think about, am I ready? Am I good enough? Who is this team? I'm playing against a team from Spain. I've never, that's when the fear starts to come in. And so for me, I always just got back to the control center. It's what can I control? I can control my fitness levels. Okay. Well, I've trained my ass off for the last year, getting ready. So I'm fit for now. I don't need to work on my fitness. I'm ready to go out there and compete. 2, I can control my competitiveness. I can go out there with no fear and do what I'm good at. And that was disruption. I was a disruptor. I was a competitor. I was athletic enough where I could compete with people and make their day difficult. And so I can control that. I can't control the person I'm playing in front of me. I can't control what they're going to play like that day, but I can control how hard I compete against him to hopefully affect his first touch, hopefully beat him in the air and give him a little bit less confidence, hopefully give him a work ethic that he's just going to know that I'm always there. Those are things I can control. Okay, cool. I'll concentrate on that. And then lastly, as I even moved into the bigger games, playing in World Cups and playing against the Manchester Uniteds of the world, the Ronaldos, the Messis, it was always about challenging reputations instead of living by them. Mm-hmm. And that was this whole idea of saying, I could let that Manchester United badge define me and go, oh crap, I got to play against this team. Oh, that's Ronaldo. Oh my gosh. He is really good looking. Wow. He's tall. He is really good looking, and athletic, and he's going to crush me today because that's Ronaldo. Where I was always I get to be in this tunnel. So the 25,000, 50,000, 70,000 people out there want to be me, sever one, not right. So take confidence in that you get to be that person. Have you ever heard this thing about how people that that say I have to do things or the people that say I get to do things. It's a totally different mindset as to like what you're going to walk into that arena with. And so I always change to that. In that tunnel, I would talk about, I get to play against Ronaldo. I get to go kick that guy and test his reputation. I get to play against in this game. I get to be the person that all the people in that stadium want to be on this day because they're here paying to see me play. And then lastly, taking confidence in the fact that I don't pick myself. Somebody else picks me to play. And so I deserve to be there because somebody has picked me to represent that badge. Then go out and own that responsibility and want it. Don't be scared of it. Don't think that you're not good enough, and don't think that you can't, because you can in all three of those things if you choose to walk out with that mentality. And I think for me, it was all those types of things that I had to do in my self-talk before those games that allowed me to go out there and perform the way that I did, or that got me the contracts and got me the jobs and got me in the starting lineup. And it was those types of things that would always, in my mentality, as I prepare for those games, as I walk out of that tunnel, that's what I'm thinking about.
It's interesting that you've said that, because one of the questions I love to ask is, tell me about how important having that mindset and that strong mindset really is. You know, you've talked about controlling the controllables, the fitness, you know, the nutrition, the competitiveness, but how important is that mindset portion to you doing what you do on a daily basis as a professional player?
Well, I think you just said it. You know, mindset isn't practiced on game day. You know, mindset is a daily practice. It's a daily validation of what you think you are and what you actually are. And I think, you know, it's huge. I think mindset, it's at least half the battle. I would say almost more than your skill set, your physical fitness, all that stuff. Because when you get on the playing field at a high level, everyone has that. You can't be a World Cup soccer player if you're not fit. You can't be a world-class player if you don't have skill sets. That's how you get there. And everyone has them. Right. And so that's when the mindset really starts to separate you and to really give you an advantage if you can get out in the game and live by that. And in the end, that, you know, that was one of my better traits as a player. Anyone that watched me play, I wasn't the most technical person. I wasn't beautiful on the ball at all. But, you know, I could do my job from a competitive landscape and really get into the minds of really good players and try to make their make their day a little bit more difficult. And I think for me, I really focused on the mind a lot. I worked a lot with our sports psychologists as I got into pros, and they started to have more of a support system for us, asking good questions. And even my managers got more into the mental side of the game. You know, feedback loops, like, did you play well? Do you think you played well? How can we create a feedback loop so I know how you played? And then I get validation from that player, or I get validation from that coach because we've chatted, we had a feedback loop so if I think that I played really well and my manager thinks I played like crap, if you don't create that feedback loop, you're never really going to know. You're just going to assume on either side of that ball. And that's not the way you get better as a player. You know, you want that feedback look, you want criticism, you want that, because that's how we get into our minds so we can prepare for the next game.
Yeah, phenomenal insight. And one of the things you touched on there was the management loop. And you played under different managers throughout your career. How important is having a relationship with the manager? It doesn't have to be a best friend type relationship, but how important is understanding what the manager wants? How important is it for the manager to understand what you bring to the team? You know, you mentioned you weren't the most flattering player on the eye, but you would go out and you would battle and you would give 100%. You would run through a brick wall for your team. How important is that understanding between player and manager?
I think it's huge. And in any relationship, communication is key. You know what I mean? If you're not talking about each other, you're not talking to each other. And, you know, again, back to the feedback side, if you're not getting real feedback about what that person thinks, you know, you're never going to get to that glorified relationship that you want. And it is the best managers in the world, the Pep Guardiolas, the Jurgen Klopps, they're the man managers at its core. They have to manage the player before they can ever create tactics and manage the team. And I think the best managers understand that, and they always will be talking to their players. Every one of those guys will have an ear once a week asking about how they are, how they're preparing, how was your week, what do you need, you know, all that kind of stuff. The best managers do that. And that's why their players, you can tell, really love playing for them. And that's why they put the spirited performances in consistently all the time, is because that feedback loop, that natural relational thing is there. And that's why the best teams win, because they have that. And you know, I was very fortunate to be a part of some of those teams. You know, our 2009, 2010 World Cup Confederations Cup squad when we got to the final of the Confederations Cup in 2009, beating Spain, snapping their 35-game win streak, and then winning our group and making to the round of 16 in the World Cup. That group really knew each other and appreciated each other, and our manager really got the most out of us as players because he managed us well and he understood which personalities we were and really allowed us to be ourselves and bring our individual personalities to the group. And that's there's a lot of work in there. There's a lot of man management. There's a lot of communication between us as a group and us between individual and their manager. But it's got to be there and it's got to stem there, because otherwise we don't really know what we're talking about. We're just assuming things.
It's interesting you brought up, the Confederations Cup, the World Cup. That period of time for the US was unbelievable. You mentioned beating Spain, and I think it's important to even mention the David Villas, the Fernando Torres in his prime, Xavi, Iniesta. That was probably the Spain side, of all time in that period. Brazil in the final. You went to the World Cup. You had England in your group. You were playing for Watford at the time, and obviously playing against probably players you played against in the Premier League, but then doing it on the international stage. And I think, from a fan point of view, and I say this from a fan perspective, as I've never played professionally, but I think as a kid, everybody's dream is to play at the World Cup or represent their country. And when you go to do that, is there an added pressure on you, or is it plainly pride? And when you go into those big games, i.e. England specifically, I'm assuming the media was going crazy for that one specifically. How do you manage that? And is that different to the normal game? And even in talking in generally about big games, FA Cup semi-finals, games against Chelsea, you always had a great time playing as Didier Drogba. You seem to really relish that. Was there something in terms of the mindset that switched for those big games, or was it just business as usual? How did you get through those? And I've asked you about 16 questions in that response, but tell me if you can, on some of those points.
Yeah, I always wanted when the lights are on, that's why we play. You know what I mean? I'm not here to get paid to train. I'm here to play in front of 50,000 people and do my job. Like that for me, I always loved that. And that's what I did it for. I loved when the lights were on, because that for me was the whole point. I don't want to be a practice player. I want to perform when it matters. And the best players do. The best players want that. They want that pressure. You can't ask Ronaldo if the game's on the line, who does he want to score the header? You'll only say one thing, me. You know what I mean? So, you have to kind of have that. And that's just confidence. Yeah. That's what breeds that. It's confidence and the ability for you to go out there and do what you think you can do. Because that's why we do it, really, because we think we can. Yes, our managers validate that. The people that pick us validate that, give us the contracts, validate that. But at the end of the day, the best players do it because they want to, and they want that moment. They want the lights on in front of 50,000, and I was like that. I wanted that because that for me was the whole point of why I was there. And the rest was a bonus. But and then the next was that whole kind of, again, like testing reputations. I loved playing against the best players, because if I walked off the field after playing well, guess where my confidence went? You know what I mean? But I also know that those guys were ahead of me. Those guys are world-class players I'm trying to get to. But in a way, again, that's if I have a growth mindset and I want to do that because I'm trying to get better every day and not just get a new contract for myself so I can make more money. You know what I mean? Like that was always secondary to, I want to be a better player tomorrow. And that's growth mindset. And if you're not challenging yourself against the best players, you're not putting yourself in those arenas, wanting to play against those better teams, wanting to play against the guys that are better than you, you're never really going to grow that much. And I always looked at that for my whole career as a challenge. It was like, can I make a team? Challenge 1. Yeah. Okay. Now I'm on 1. Can I start? Challenge 2. Can I be the captain of this team? Challenge 3. I was captain of Watford by my 3rd season at Watford. Okay. Now I'm a captain. Now can I play? Now I'm a leader in my team. And now I want to play for my country. I think I can go represent my country at a high level. Okay, do that. But again, I wasn't thinking about playing for America when I was landed on English shores and laying in the 12th division. It wasn't part of my mindset because it shouldn't have been until you get to the point where you've earned that stripe. And I was just really focused on that and making sure that each step of the way I'm re-goal setting, making sure that each step I'm okay, now I start. Cool. now can I be a leader on this team? And you know what I mean? Like that's a natural progression. I should be able to now focus on that because I'm starting and I'm playing well. You know, why can't I be a leader? You know, now why can't I bring more of a stamp onto into this team? And so that was just me every step of the way, and really refocusing of like, you know, all of a sudden you're beating Spain, and then we all come in with that, hey, maybe we can win our group for the first time. Maybe we can go into a World Cup, you know, but again, we deserve that. And again, that's where, again, this whole kind of refocusing, this validation, but doing it on a level where you're looping that. And so then that can be more valid and you are moving in the right direction. And I think that focus is like what I call like dreaming big and thinking small. And so like dreaming big, I want to go do those things, but what can I manage now? What's the small version of how I can get there? And so if you're thinking small and actioning those moments, you're going to move in the right direction. But, you know, make sure that you're picking a place, the destination that's not so close. You know, why can't you go, you know, do something much bigger than people think you can? You know what I mean? And so that was always my mindset going into things like that.
And a lot of it would probably come from confidence, as you mentioned, but also the consistency. You know, like you said, you know, you're getting into Watford and you're, you know, playing every week, and then the next step is becoming a key player at Watford, and the next step is becoming a captain, and the next step is playing for your country. And it's consistency that brings you up through that ladder, so to speak. And in my opinion, watching football, consistency seems to be the hardest thing, in my opinion, for professional players to do. For young players listening to this, what would be your advice to them in terms of the keys to consistent performance?
I think that self-awareness piece is huge. Yeah. I think when you know what you're good at and you need to work on, because you're looking at who you are as a player with a real focus and a real honest eye, I think that's the first thing. Because if you don't know what you're bad at, you're never going to be good at it. You know what I mean? It just doesn't work that way. And I think if you don't recognize what you are, you're humble enough in your approach to think that maybe you're not very good at something, because all of us are not very good at something. I think that's where it needs to start, because you can't be the complete player that's going to make it pro. Because you can't just be good at one thing to make it pro. You got to be good at all aspects of the ball. You don't have to be a 10 out of 10. You got to be a 10 out of 10 in two of them, you know, but you can be a 7 out of 10 and 8 out of 10 at the other, but you got to get to that point. And that takes practice, and that takes a lot of awareness. And so I think it starts there. Again, second is the work ethic piece. You know, once you've got to figure out what you're not very good at or how you can hone skills you are good at, now you got to get out there and do them. You learn those answers by asking questions to the managerial side, coaches, players, feedback loop, going back to that. And then the other side is actually taking that humble approach, saying, okay, I do need to work on these things, and then going out and doing that work and making sure that you do it. And I like to say, like, when I do that work, I like to call that dark work, you know, like we do in the dark when no one else is around. You know, I always like making mistakes when no one else was around. And so if I need to work on my left-footed diagonal ball, which is one of the things I needed to work on when I made it to the professional scene, my long balls across my big switches weren't big enough and weren't good enough. I was kicking them out of play and doing all these things. And I knew I needed to work on that. And so I would just pick a player and stay after training and start, you know, hit 20 balls every day. That's it. But by 3 games later, I'm hitting that with my left foot and it's coming off. And I just know because I've put in 500 reps, and knowing that I didn't want to play that ball 3 weeks ago, but now I do, because that confidence has been built, and now I hit it in a game, and now I go back to that validation piece. Yeah, cool. I can do it now. Okay, confidence. Cool. Now I'm back in the game. Now I'll do that again next week, because now I got to be consistent, to your point. And so, yeah, it's the practice. The practice is what makes that consistency happen. But that awareness piece is huge, because you got to know where you're going.
I love that answer. You know, it's almost, you know, indirectly practice makes perfect, but it's that awareness of knowing where you're at, knowing where you want to get to, and knowing how to get there. And it's the repetition, especially in terms of football, of just repetition, muscle memory, and it all kind of follows and builds in. I think that's absolutely phenomenal. A couple of quick fire questions for you, for our listeners as well. What would be your traditional pre-match meal?
Beans on toast with avocado and bacon.
I have to ask this, was that when you're on 40 pounds a week? Because beans on toast seems like a 40 pounds a week meal, and then you've just kind of consistently kept it as you've went on.
Yeah, added more garnishes as I went on. You know, once I could afford a real fresh organic avocado, that's when I threw that on there. So they got generally more nutritious as they went. But yeah, you can have beans on toast like a multi-grain toast for like $4 a week.
Oh, phenomenal.
Which I had about 25 to spend. So that was more than enough for my food budget in year one. Plus spaghetti, that kind of thing, like a lot of carbo load stuff, one packet of noodles and some boiling water and some tomato sauce will get you a long way.
What about atmosphere in the changing room? How important was that?
It's huge. And I believe that's a locker room thing. You can have a good leader in there, but if the players don't participate in the group, again, it's just a guy leading by himself. And I think that locker room, that's where teams win. It's locker room vibe. It's guys that get along. It's guys that want to fight for each other for 90 minutes. It's not guys that want to fight each other. You know what I mean? And so I think having that locker room vibe is hugely important.
What about being able to switch off? Was there anything that you did whenever you were playing specifically that helped you switch off and maybe even mentally just turn it down from football?
Yeah, no, I was a big hobby person. I'm a big believer, and I say this in all of our programs. You don't have anything else to do. Eventually you'll need it. And then you're going to be really disappointed because you don't have it. And I was an art student. So I was a big design guy. I'd go to the museums, the art shows, the music shows. I was like that side of life. I was a really social guy. Again, that's kind of why as I moved into leadership roles, I always made it once a month. We had a team day out, night out, whatever it was, because that's also that social scene where guys really start to come out of their shells. If all I do is train with you, I know who you are as a player, and I can maybe talk to you after the game, or I can put my arm around you after training to see how you are. But I don't really know you. You know what I mean? Like until I see you socially, until we all go out and we all get to show our true colors and show who we are, you're not really getting to that. And I can't manage somebody that I don't know. You know what I mean? And so for me, it was always about that social side of getting to know your players. You have to get out there. You got to see them in the real life. So I always found that important to a locker room. And and then the last part of it is just that communication piece, again, making sure that we're all talking to each other. We're being honest with each other, because I'm just telling you what you want to hear. I'm not really getting that real communication, that I want. I'm just, telling you what you want to hear. And that's not going to get the real growth that we want to get as a collective. If I'm not challenging you to be something that either you don't know, or I'm making you aware of something that maybe you don't know, or you're not taking that with real humility and saying, okay, I could apply that, or I can try that, to maybe you are right, or maybe we can agree on this and I agree with you. So let's go out there and do it together. But until we get to that moment where we can grow together, then we're not going to really get there. And that's team performances. Say that for the same as individuals too.
Phenomenal insight. Tell me a little bit about injury prevention. A couple of tips for injury prevention.
Stay hydrated. I think we don't drink enough water as a 90-minute athlete. Not even close. And I think our bodies get dehydrated way more than we think. And I think hydration was key a lot. I learned a lot about that. When you play internationally and you're flying 12 hours in one way, and then you can play a game and fly back, and you got to play with your club the next day. And like you're playing 3 games in 3 hemispheres in 12 days. It's like, you got to learn about the science of the body. Really looking into what drives the body is unique. I think that's one thing. And then that now leads into recovery. How do you recover from games? I think a lot of times we burn ourselves out too. We always talk about like, how do you heal from kicks or injuries, or, playing 3 games in 5 days? Like that's, part of it. But then it's also like, are we going too hard? I've trained 7 days because I'm trying to be messy, and I've overtrained myself. So my Tuesday game, I play like crap because I've trained myself 7 days in a row. You know what I mean? Like, because I'm trying to like burn myself out, or I'm being too obsessed. Like, I don't really like the obsession word. I think being obsessed with something isn't going to get you where you want to go. You're going to burn yourself out. Yes, you have to think about it all the time. Yes, you have to be mindful of what some people might consider an obsession. But I say you got to put the ball away. Go to the art show on Tuesday night. And then you're going to show up on Wednesday and train harder because you put your mind out of the park for a second. You know what I mean? And I think that whole obsession focus piece, I think, is a little bit too much in my opinion and in my experience. When I could put the ball away, and that was always the metaphor I use. Like, guys, make sure you put the ball away this week. Hang out with your son, go to the family dinner. You know what I mean? Do it. Go to the museum with your girlfriend. Like, do it. Play the video game with your buddy. Like, do it. Like, that's going to put your mind into place. So when you come back to that field, not only are you going to appreciate that field a little bit more, but you're actually going to want to be there because you're not burned out.
I echo that completely because I think it's so important, especially now, as it's grown the last number of years, social media, the accessibility of people to negativity and to comments and to seeing things and to things that can pull them down and pull them into a dark space. I think it's incredibly important to have that switch off and to have that place you can go, or that couple of things that you can do where you're just mentally refreshed when you come back to the pitch the next day. I echo those entirely. And for any young people listening to this, that's what I would echo those thoughts that Jay has just brought, that you need to have something to shift your focus. You cannot, just live in this virtual world and this world of football and online world, especially as the quality and the content of football in itself just continues to rise. It's certainly an ocean that you can get lost in. One final question for you before we move into our closers. Role models and mentorship. Is there anyone that stuck out for you in your career as a role model and as a mentor, and how important is that for you and for young players?
Oh, it's hugely important. I also like to call that support. I think mentorship is support, and I think support comes from a lot of different angles. That can come from, for me, it was my parents, my family, my support system. Again, I was very fortunate to have good parents, good teachers, good coaches, people that I could learn from. And both my parents were coaches and teachers. And so I was always in an educator environment where we asked questions, how was it out there? What did you like about it? What did you not? And then, because that's what my parents did as teachers. And so I kind of was, again, very fortunate to be around that environment. So by the time I grew up and started to make my own decisions, I had a good support system I could rely on. So I think for me, it was my parents number one, for sure. And then I think that other side of support is asking for it. If you don't have parents that support you, or your dad doesn't want to drop you off at training, but you want to go with your best buddy, and it's because his dad's awesome and he loves dropping us off and standing there and doing the thing, cool. Hang out with that kid more and get him to do that, because that helps you. It serves you. It's something that I think, again, we can find our own support. We shouldn't just wait for it. And I think that's one of the common misconceptions about where we are, or what we need as players, and I think, a lot of players, they don't look for support because they don't get it in their close circle. But if you look for it, and that's, again, going to the school mentorship program, being a part of Big Buddies, or mentorship programs, high school programs. If you're a younger kid, set it up. Ask the kid after training, hey, can I ask you some questions? I'm just trying to learn as a young pro or a young player. What have you, I see your first team all conference this year. I really want to work to be that. Is there any way you can help, or just tell me what you're doing for training? Again, these are simple things. That high school senior is going to be sure, dude, no problem. You know what I mean? This is what I do. Maybe we can train after training someday. You know what I mean? Y'all come show you what to do. You'd be surprised amount of older people, the people that are ahead of you, these mentors. Again, I believe mentorship's ageless too. I believe that my 6-year-old mentors me as much as I mentor him sometimes, because he teaches me things that I don't see. And I think that's a vice versa relationship, but you have to ask for it. And if you don't have it naturally, like I did, you got to go find it. And that's coaches. That's, again, asking people, asking your friend group. I think going back to what we were just talking about too, do you have people in your support system that aren't like you? If I'm a kid and I play for my academy team and all I hang out with is just kids that look like me and are like me and wear the same jacket as me, am I really getting what I need to do for my own development? I always say, look, hang out with people that don't look like you. Hang out with people that are not from where you're from. Hang out with people that wear a different jacket than you. You know what I mean? That's why I'm always because that's where we really learn about how we challenge each other, how we can get the most out of us. And how we really learn who we are, because that's going to be the real driver in the end.
Absolutely agree with that. It's interesting you made that point, about just asking someone, to stay a little bit behind or whatever. There's a young player at Liverpool right now called Connor Bradley, and Connor is now in the Northern Ireland setup national team, but he's very much a reserve at Liverpool. But he's been on record of saying that he asked Mo Salah to stay behind with him after training and to take him on one-on-ones. And Connor's a 19-year-old right back, and Mo Salah is now his official mentor at the club, doing gym work with him. And just from a simple request, hey, you're really good. Can you stay behind training and take me on one-on-one for 20 minutes a day? And there we go. And there's a friendship blossoming, a mentorship blossoming. And I think it's really proof of pudding, of some of the thoughts that you've just echoed there and the thoughts that you've just said. So I think it's a really good live example of something right now in the Premier League that we can point to, which backs up everything that you've just said. Last question for you before we begin to wrap this up. If you could offer one piece of advice, if I was to put an 18-year-old kid down in front of you and he said, I'm about to go pro, sign my first pro contract, tell me something that will help me, what would you tell that person?
I mean, I go back to the pillars of what we do at Rise and Shine, and that's these are the things in order, that all kids need to do to find their paths. And this is what we teach for our teenage programs. Is first it's and these are in order. These are the pillars that we work from, and the first thing is belief. If you don't believe it, you won't do it. To be honest, if it's a big dream, especially, like, you got to go through a lot of things to get there, and if you don't believe that you can, if you haven't created a belief system that this is what you want and this is what you are, and you don't believe you will, you probably won't. And so it starts with belief. You got to believe in what you do and believe that you can. And then from there, it's respect. Because, if you don't respect yourself, if you don't respect the person across from you, or you don't respect the environment, the room you're in, the place you're in, the establishment that you're living under, if you don't get those three things right and respect them, then again, you probably won't be able to go through the doors that you need to be successful. So first is belief, then it's respect. The next one is work ethic. This is this ability to get out of bed when you don't want to. We can all work hard. We can all do the extra sprint at the end of that Tuesday training session and think that we're working hard. But work ethic is different. Work ethic is doing it when you look outside, you got to go run 14 miles and it's pissing down rain and you don't want to do it because you're tired. Work ethic gets you out of bed. Work ethic gets you out there and doing it. And if you're not working, if you're not getting up and doing it when you don't want to, the ones that will pass you. Those are the ones that will get the contracts. Those are the ones that will make teams. And those are the ones that will get the jersey. And if you're not working through that and getting up every day and working through it with work ethic, you probably won't get there in the end. And then the last thing is, when you're doing the work and you're putting in all that effort, what happens is adversity. You're going to get injured. Your mom might get sick. Your friend might die in a car accident. You might have a mental health issue. Adversity will happen, and it's guaranteed for all of us in any situation we're in. We're going to have adversity in our lives. And if we don't expect that, we're not working towards adversity, we're understanding that it can happen. And what happens when adversity happens, the way we get through that, the way we punch through those walls, is with positivity. And so that's the last piece, is that, you can believe in yourself, you can respect everyone around you and get to the environments, you can work hard, you can get in there every day and get to those environments. But in that adversity piece, it's that positive side that's going to get you through it, to get you on the other side and look back and go, oh, I had to work hard through that. I had to stay positive throughout that. I had to take that punch because now I'm back up and I can see that helped me grow to be the player that I am now. And I think that positivity piece isn't called upon enough. We got to tell people to be tougher instead of saying, well, what could you take out of that situation? What did you like about that situation? Oh, you didn't make the team. Well, what's the positive of that? You have more time to spend with your friends so you can grow your own personality. So next time you can be on a better team. Maybe that's something I can look at positively and go, yeah, maybe that could work. Or, you know what? Maybe I didn't train hard enough on that right foot. And on the 92nd minute, if I would have scored that right footer and wrapped it around the keeper, I would maybe make that team. Maybe I should go work on that tomorrow. I'm going to go work on that bender around the corner, because I think that was my mistake, because I'm humble enough to know it and think it and actually believe it. That's being positive. That's taking the positive out of a negative situation. And I think that is very under called upon in people's journeys. And they, we're not looking for negatives. We're expecting them. But when they happen, we can take positives out of them and really grow from them. And so, that for me is the best advice I always give to young kids. And it's all those things in order. But it's four things. It's 4 words.
It's absolutely outstanding advice for any young person, outstanding advice for any person in life, actually, and we gear this towards young people. So I say young people, but that advice is phenomenal across the board at any level, at any age, no matter what you're doing. That is applicable. And I think it's phenomenal advice. And just as we close this, I want to just give a shout out to yourself. Obviously, you're on Instagram. I encourage all of our listeners to look you up, find you, to see what you're up to, Rise and Shine. It's on there. It's on Instagram. It's booming. There's lots of crazy stuff, fun stuff happening. And also something that I don't think is talked about enough is you have a phenomenal documentary on YouTube chronicling your entire career in depth, from the non-league to the Premier League to the World Cup to MLS, playoff final, scoring a goal in the playoff, your family coming over. It's all in there. And I echo and I advise any of our listeners, get on that, watch that documentary. It is an hour and a half of phenomenal content. And Jay, you've had a great career. This has been a great conversation. I encourage all of our listeners to find you on social media, follow you, see what's going on. And I just want to thank you so much for your time today on the Match Fit Football podcast.
Oh, it's my pleasure. You know, that when that movie was produced by thousands of people I've never met on Kickstarter back in 2011 after the World Cup, you know, this was a Kickstarter project. $223,000 was raised on my behalf to share that story. You know what I mean? I didn't make the money, but it was thousands of people I never met were donating their hard-earned money so that I could tell my story. And so that's what I do now. You know, it's very much my purpose. Rise and Shine is of course, it started as a documentary film paid for by the public. But now it's a charity, it's a music festival, it's a youth program, it's an upcoming youth app that's going to help gamify learning for young people. With our founding partner, EA Sports, so the biggest video game company in the world. We're making a learning video game based on the Rise and Shine program, based on the Rise and Shine mindset and the mentors we bring in through our program. And so, you know, for me, it's my purpose. It's truly who I am. And it's really always just a privilege. You know, I say yes to any time I can share it, because that's my job. It's truly who I am. And if people can take my experiences, both good, bad, ugly, you know, I have all those experiences, and and help them, create their own experiences. You know, again, that's what this is all about. So again, thanks for having me on, and I always appreciate telling my story.
Been our absolute pleasure to have you here, Jay, and I know our listeners will really enjoy that. Guys, this was Jay DeMerit. I was Darren Potts. This was a Match Fit Football podcast. Thank you so much for listening to the show.